Welcome to the Women in Exhibitions Network second session, The Road to Success. My name is Martin Fullard and I'm the editorial director at MASH Media. Now, I'm delighted today to be joined by quite an esteemed panel, 6 of the European chapter's most prominent members, who I'm hoping are going to share with us some of their experiences about how they've got to where they are today. And we're going to be offering tips to hopefully empower our younger generation. So before we go any further, I think it's customary for the panel to introduce themselves so we know exactly who is in the room. So I think we'll go clockwise in order as how they appear on the screen in front of me. So Kelly, perhaps you'd like to start.
Yeah, I'm Kelly Reynolds. I am the head of event operations for the organising arm of ADNEC in Abu Dhabi. So I'm here representing the Middle East chapter of the Women in Exhibitions Network.
Oh, very nice. I used to live in Abu Dhabi. Daria, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hello, everyone. I'm Daria Smith, and I'm a senior event leader with over a decade experience in B2B exhibitions.
Thank you. Katerina.
Yeah, hi, I'm Katharina Rohrbach. I'm German. I'm working in Singapore now as the managing director for Hanover Affairs Asia Pacific. And yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Alison.
Hi everybody, I'm Alison Jackson. I'm currently working as Group Managing Director of 19 Group, which was bought by Phoenix Private Equity just over a year ago.
Thank you. Tamar.
Hi everyone, I'm Tamar Beck. I'm the CEO of a company called Gleanin. Previous to that, I've worked for Reed Exhibitions for 15 years.
And Laurie.
Hi there, my name is Laurie Hoinkes and I'm the Managing Director of Montgomery Events, part of Montgomery Group, and we run food, drink and hospitality events, B2B events in Europe. Great. So I'm sure you'll all agree, everyone, that is quite a lot of experience in the virtual room. So I'm sure this is going to be a fantastic discussion. Now, you'll see at the bottom, as I'm sure you should all know by now, that there is a Q&A function. We obviously want to have audience engagement. That's the key to everything we do. So please, as the session's running, pop your questions into the sidebar. We'll try to get to as many as we can towards the end, unless there's something that really jumps out to us. So we might throw some curveballs at our panel just to see how they handle that. But first and foremost, I want to kind of get an idea of everyone's experience in the industry. And I'm going to kind of open the floor to the panel to each give us their own personal story of how they got to where they are today. So maybe Laurie, if we could start with you, tell please our audience, what's your story? All right, well, my path into the exhibition industry was definitely not a straight line, a bit more of a zigzag. I started my career in the Canadian Armed Forces, studying as an engineer to be a leader and officer in the military. And after doing my 5 years of service, I ended up going into a number of different industries over the years. I made a decision really early in my career not to focus sort of my USP around, a specific function like sales or in a specific industry. I really wanted to be focusing more on the core skill of leadership, and that being sort of my USP, and in particular leadership around change and transformation. And that allowed me to really move between different industries without really any sort of issues. So I've worked in nuclear, cosmetics, food manufacturing, did a tech startup, so kind of covered a lot of space in my career. Like most things, I really wanted to drive my career forward. So I made decisions to move from one industry to the next based on wanting to get additional opportunities and challenges. And so about 3 years ago, I was introduced to the idea of running this exhibition company through a mutual colleague, and I wasn't really sure. I didn't really know anything about exhibitions, but I'm absolutely hooked. They say that it's like a virus. Once you catch it, you never leave. And I think that this is the last industry I'll ever work in. It's absolutely amazing. But again, came at this from an idea of, this is a challenging industry that is either changing quite a bit or needs to change. And so there's an opportunity here to really look at how we do what we do and transform that a little bit. So yeah, I think so it's been an interesting career, like I said, focusing rather on, on core skill, building my core skill and being really good at, that sort of thing, rather than being an expert in sales or, a certain industry.
Great. Sounds like you have been busy. Career in the military, very interesting. I didn't know that about you, actually. Tamar, perhaps I could now ask you, tell us about your story. How have you got to where you are now?
So, I've been around for a long time, but I fell into the exhibition industry like lots of people, I think. And I started in sales a long, long time ago, came from publishing, which is quite a common path. I joined Reed Exhibitions in '95 as a sales manager, and I worked myself up there. The last 8 years that I worked at Reed Exhibitions, I was a group exhibition director. I loved my job. I was absolutely hooked on exhibitions, just like Laurie described. I think you know immediately that it's for you, and you can't imagine doing anything else. The kind of highs and the lows of being in exhibitions. I love my job, but after a long time doing it for quite a large organisation, I kind of didn't enjoy the politics too much. But I love my team and I love the events that I worked on. I then decided to have a couple of kids, and that was Reed were great to me in that they let me return kind of part-time and stuff, but at that point I think the writing was on the wall, and I kind of longed for redundancy and a kind of way out at that point, and to have a different life. It finally came to me in January 2011. I was determined then never to get caught up in being I didn't want to be an employee anymore. And so I decided to take on, freelance work and just take the stuff on that I could get really passionate and excited about again. So I did that for a few months. And then an ex-colleague of mine, you meet lots of great people in this industry, an ex-colleague of mine introduced me to AJ and Peter, who are now my co-founders on Gleanin. I consulted with them for a little bit, and we decided to come together and launch our business in May 2012. And we're a supplier to the exhibition industry. So our customers are exhibition organisers. So I'm now on the other side. Having been an organiser, I'm now a supplier. And that's my journey.
And a busy one at that. Alison, what about you? How did you get to where you are today?
I'm possibly the oldest one of Tamar. I think she's been around for a long time. I can probably beat her. So I did a degree in modern languages and did a kind of a sort of 6-month stint for an exhibition organiser in France. Came back to the UK, had no idea what I wanted to do, answered an ad in the then Guardian newspaper, and turned up at a company called Montgomery, who were brilliant. Worked for them doing a mixture of everything, really, sales, marketing. I think I even did a stint in operations office, and they were brilliant. It was a really great grounding. I felt that I had to leave, otherwise I'd be retiring or kind of being taken out in a coffin, because they were so good to me. And then I sort of worked for IR conferences, which was very different. And then I did a decade at EMAP. So I've been around the block, as they say, and I've tried to get out of the industry several times. I think I've probably sent Tamar emails saying I'm never coming back, I've had enough. But it is like a bug, and it does get you. I've sort of tried to become a yoga teacher, do acupuncture and do something different, but actually it's in your bones, and I absolutely love it. And I've been really lucky. I can honestly say I've had all my bosses, bar one, have been men. They've been absolutely brilliant. And then finally a year ago, I got an opportunity to invest in a small business, which is what I've always wanted to do. So turned up in working for 19, and we're a sort of fast growth business who were, like everyone else, on standby, but focusing on sort of security and resilience markets. But no, it's been great. And actually I kind of, I think once you're probably in for good.
Well, that's encouraging. Like you say, we wouldn't want to lose you. You keep coming back, and that's a good thing.
I'm not very good at yoga.
Katerina, could we come to you? I'd be interested to hear of your experience so far, and how have you got to where you are today?
Well, I think my story is a little bit boring, because I started 27 years ago with Deutsche Messe AG, and I'm still working for them. So but I have been lucky. I went through a different department. So I studied actually business administration with the focus on trade fair industry. And then after that, I started sales at Hannover Messe team. And then I moved on to Singapore, to our subsidiary, former subsidiary at that time, and worked there for a few years, returned to Hanover, Germany in 2000. Yeah, and since then I did a lot of different shows, actually, a lot of shows, take over management positions, starting with 4 people in the very beginning, ended more or less with 75, 75 people in the end, and moved on to Singapore beginning of this year, because we decided in the company to come up with a new subsidiary again. So I'm actually establishing a new subsidiary. So I'm all by myself at the moment, just one person or one employee working for me. It's a completely challenge, but it's really, really nice to do so. But I'm still with Deutsche Messe AG.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Oh, well, you're saying it's boring. It doesn't sound boring at all.
Yeah.
I thought my job was stressful.
It's just one company, you know. Just
Yes,
one company.
absolutely. Daria, can we come to you? Tell us about your experience, please.
Absolutely. I actually come from publishing background originally as well, like Tamar, and that was 2007, I think, and I actually spent 10 years with now world's biggest organizer Informa. I started quite junior in a junior sales role, and steadily grown to head the sales team there and sales strategy on Whitefoot's portfolio within Health and Nutrition Network. Having really incredibly enjoyed time with Informa, I've got really good memories from there. I wanted a new challenge, and I moved to DMG Events a couple of years ago as European Energy Portfolio Director. It's been really fun, really enjoyed it. I think events is a very special industry and sector to work for, so absolutely loving it. And it's been an exciting journey so far, and I'm looking forward to the new challenges ahead.
Well, yes, new challenges. That might be an understatement of where we find ourselves now. My goodness me. And so, Kelly, last one left to share the experiences. Please tell us exactly how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So when I graduated, I thought I wanted to be an accountant. So I headed off and got a job training to be an auditor, and I only lasted 6 months because I realised it just wasn't a particularly interesting job. Sorry for any auditors or accountants who might be watching, but 6 months doing that job has stood me in very good stead in particularly in operations, because obviously we have to be pretty budget focused and have good financial acumen. So it was a good initial job, but like most of us, I didn't intend to end up working in the exhibitions industry. I just kind of found it by accident. I saw a tiny little advert in the local newspaper in Sutton, where I lived at the time. Ended up joining a company called iMark Communications, who don't exist anymore. But I was there for 4 years, and it was the best kind of grounding for my career, because we used to do on average 12 exhibitions a year, quite small, quite niche software exhibitions, so quite tech. But the brilliant thing about that was that starting as an ops assistant, working up my way up to ops manager over 4 years, I covered about 50. We did about 50 exhibitions in that 4-year period. So the fantastic thing about that was it probably took me the next 10 years after that before I got to the next 50 events. So it was a really intense but brilliant start to kind of learn the trade, if you like. I then went on to Clarion, where I spent over 10 years. It's quite interesting how many of us have been with a big organizer for a big chunk of time. And like you say, it's really boring being in the same place. But actually, I'm sure we've all had a similar experience where there's so much opportunity in these big companies. If you're good at your job and you're motivated and you're willing, there's so much opportunity. So that's certainly what my experience was like at Clarion. I after having my second child, I left Clarion and went to work for Freeman for a short 6-month stint. So it's interesting to see the contractor side of things. I think that when you're in ops, you tend to see it as the triangle of organizer, venue, and contractor. So it's quite interesting filling that little contractor gap, albeit for quite a short period of time. And then I decided, because having 2 kids, the juggle, it was quite hard. And so I started my own business doing freelancing, a bit of mentoring and coaching. And that's really when I started learning a lot more about myself. And that was quite an interesting period of my career. Actually, I did 4 years working for myself, and it was brilliant from the freedom perspective. Like Tamar said, it's quite nice having the freedom and being able to come and go, not work fixed hours and all of that. But of course, then you have the added pressures of where's the money coming from, and suddenly you have to become an expert in sales, marketing, all these other things that you probably didn't really necessarily, in my case, didn't necessarily need to worry so much about before. So it was a pretty intense 4 years. And then the opportunity arose last year to come out to Abu Dhabi and work for ADNEC. So I work for the organising arm of ADNEC. We're now called Capital Events. And this is a whole new adventure and chapter for the whole family. So it's been an exciting time. And yeah, learning all sorts of new things despite doing the same kind of job. It's a whole different world out here. Business is done in a different way. You're working with lots of different people from different cultures, different languages, and there's new challenges all of the time. But I love that because we continue to learn and grow. So.
Tell me about it. Yeah, I was out in Abu Dhabi for 9 years myself, so I know it is different. Yeah, very different game indeed. Okay, right. So I've got some questions really for the panel, and this is where I must remind our audience that we want you to engage with us, and the Q&A function is there at the bottom of your screen. I do urge you all to ask some questions and throw them towards us. We really do want to make this interactive. But I've got this question that I want to throw at a couple of you, and Laurie, I'd like to start with you. I'd like to know, in your opinion, how do you think we as an industry compare to other industries with regards to women filling C-level positions?
Well, for myself, I think that a lot of the other industries that I found myself in before were really male dominated, but not just, at the C-suite level, but right throughout the organization. And I think it was really challenging as a woman coming in to kind of find other female role models that you could learn from or that could give you some support. I think one of the benefits that we have in our industry is that's not the case. We actually have a tremendous number of really talented, amazing women at all levels of the organization in exhibitions and events, just not as many right at that sort of C-suite level. And so I think there's a massive opportunity for us, collaborating like we are now with women in exhibitions and, support from yourself to really change that and to make sure that the women in the industry have the support and guidance and are given the experience and exposure that they need to be able to go after those types of positions and be, the right person for the role. So I actually think we're well placed because we are an industry that is really rich and talented women. And so there won't be that sort of challenge, which I think some other industries face.
Yeah, cheeky follow-up question to you then, Laurie, off script then. But do you think that actually we can lead as an industry and actually other industries can learn from us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
I think that's actually a really good point, is that we don't need to figure this all out ourselves just, for us and how it works for us. There are other industries too out there that have really done a little bit, maybe more that we could learn from and vice versa. So it's really a good opportunity for us to stretch this network out to other networks of women who've been working on this sort of issue for quite a long time.
Good. Daria, can I ask you the same question then? How do you think we compare to other industries?
Yeah, actually having produced events for the energy sector, which I believe probably one of the worst when it comes to real diversity, things are not so bad in events, as Laurie mentioned. I think there are lots of women in the sector, and I think there have been traditionally more women in the sector. Though I feel that there are more women dominating it sort of at executive level, manager level, and not really achieving maybe those director status or sitting on boards. So I think there's still work to do, certainly, when it comes to fair representation of women at that highest level, for sure.
Yeah, I think too, so a couple of people mentioned in their sort of intro to their career, you know, that their employer was really sensitive and supportive when they'd gone away to have a family and then they were coming back into the industry. And I think that's one of the really important areas where we can really provide a lot of support, is just making sure that we're flexible enough to allow people to come back and make a full contribution in the way that that really does work for them, you know, and their family as well. I know one of the things we try to do quite a bit at Montgomery is just really look at how we can be a bit creative and still achieve what we're trying to achieve, and give someone that flexibility to make their contribution in a way that works for them and their family.
Quite so. Katerina, could I get your take on that then, please? How do you think we compare to other industries with regards to women filling positions in C-level posts?
Well, you know, maybe you follow the media, because in Germany there's a huge discussion at the moment regarding the quota, the quota of women, and they came up with this so-called Gleichstellungsstrategie. So it's a strategy for the gender equality, and they found out, or they found out or stated that only or scarce 10% of the board of directors are female. So this is not really a lot. And actually, as a member of the German chapter, Women of Exhibitions, we tried to find out how many females or how many women are actually in the leading positions in the exhibition industry. And it was kind of scary, or it was kind of disappointing to realize that it was really hard to get this information first, because we asked all the big companies, 13 participated in the end. We asked them, and well, in the end, we had some results, of course. 19% are in the first level management, and about 27 were in the second level. But there's a huge spread from 0% to 67%. And I don't know about the other countries, but in Germany, more than 60% are actually working in the industry, in the exhibition industry. So it's kind of surprising that there are not 60% in the managing level either. So I think there's still a lot of room for improvement.
Quite so. In fact, I'm going to throw a question in that's come in from the audience. It's anonymous, so we can't find out who it is, but it's an interesting question. And it asked, if we are one of the leaders in the representation of women, why does it feel like we are so underrepresented at so many levels, including in things like associations and on boards and so on? Has anyone got an answer to our anonymous friend? Alison, please.
Look, it's hard, isn't it? If you were to go on to, if you were just landed from Mars and you went to look at the website for, and I'm not picking on these companies, I just did it yesterday, Informa and Reed, and looked at their executive boards, they are white males in the main, and let's be clear, it's not only about women, gender diversity we need to get better on in the events industry. I think it's, you know, I think it is an issue. I think it's getting better, and I think it's complex. It's really frustrating. I sat on the AO board twice. When I did it, there were 4 of us. They seem to have gone backwards actually, rather than forwards. You know, that tend to be the same. I mean, I think some of the males on there were probably on it when I was on there. But we've all got to work together. It's very complex. It's about flexible work, and it's about engaging with men. It's not just one solution. We are, you know, we could do better. We had a school report, we could do better. The reality is, if you look at any event business, the middle of the building is loads and loads of really talented women. And as you go further up, something happens and they disappear. And our job, I feel, is to, and I've seen some brilliant women disappear, you know, and had anguished conversations about how can we make this work. I do feel it's easier to make it work now with flexible working, but I can think now of at least 10 to 20 brilliant women who just gave up. They just gave up. And I think we've got to, it's getting people through the middle of the building to the top. We need to be better at. And there are lots of different obstacles of that, but it's just not complex. And I've had lots of conversations with the AO about it, and they say, yeah, but we've got 2 on now, we've got 3 on now. And I think we kind of, they could do better.
Tamar, did you want to add? I saw, Kelly, you put your hand up as well. We'll come to you, but Tamar, if you could chip in.
Yeah, I was just going to say that let's be frank, we're not doing well. We could do better, but we've got a massive problem. The numbers tell you. So let's be frank. I think the comparison with other industries is like, it's an interesting thing to do, but we have to be careful comparing ourselves, because comparing ourselves and saying, oh well, we're doing better than that industry, means that people can just accept that we're doing okay and it will get better over time. I mean, how much time are we going to wait for this to get better? Like Alison, I know lots of amazing women who have actually gone off and launched their own shows and their own business and done brilliantly well. And they just had to do that because they'd reached the top. There was just no way for them to kind of break down whatever those invisible barriers are. So I think it's important just to be absolutely frank. We are doing okay. If you think 60 to 70% of females in middle management and the rest of the business, and only a 9 to 10% representation on the board level is okay. I don't. But so I think that actually there's a lot of room to do, a lot of work to do. That's what I wanted to say.
That's a really interesting point. Thanks for bringing up the numbers. The numbers, they do absolutely add that depth of perspective. Kelly, did you want to chime in and add anything to that?
Yeah, it's just a thought that I think one of the things that needs to change. I mean, I've not personally recruited for a C-level position, by the way, but what you sort of read a lot about is that when you're recruiting anybody, you should be quite careful about thinking about what the kind of criteria are, what the skills are, what the experience is, what the the characteristics are of the person that you're appointing into that position. And no doubt, typically, when companies, not just in our industry, in any industry, are looking at appointing new leaders at the C level, I've no doubt that probably a lot of those male attributes are high on the list. Probably you don't see things like empathy, which, and I'm generalizing here, of course, but generally women tend to be a bit more empathetic than men. We've seen recently with some of the leaders of some of the countries and how they've dealt with the COVID outbreaks. People like wonderful Jacinda in New Zealand. I'm a massive fangirl of hers. But there's been a lot of press about how female leaders of countries have dealt better, arguably, with this outbreak because they've come at it from a different perspective to the men. And so I think as businesses, we need to start thinking about recruiting against some of those more female traits and more female kind of perspectives on things, and that can only help get more people up at the top.
Yeah, any different perspective to the one we've got now from government would be welcome, for sure. There's another question I wanted that sort of relates to this part of our discussion, which has just moved on the screen. No, there it is. Olivia Boswell writes, does the panel think that quotas would work or be a viable option within the industry to kind of ensure there is a greater equality, I suppose? Does anyone want to field that? Yes, Laurie, please.
Personally, I'm not a fan of quotas. I think that you have to make sure that the best person for the job is put in the role. I think that's really important. But I think what we need to do, and it's like Alison said, there's not one cause effect, one thing that's going to change this equation and move us in the right direction. It's a whole bunch of different activities that we need to take and a bunch of things that we need to do. But at the heart of it is making sure that we take, those of us in leadership positions are doing all that we can to train and support and give growth opportunities to the people, to make sure that they're this next generation of leader is ready to take on that opportunity. But I really wholeheartedly don't like the idea of quotas, and I would say I was in a situation many years ago where I know I was put forward for a position in the automotive industry because there was literally no other women, and they were just super keen to have a woman in that role, and it was a massive challenge I wasn't really ready for, and it wasn't really a great experience for me to go through, trying to prove that I could do something that I actually really wasn't ready to do. And so I don't believe that's the right approach.
Great. Yeah, Tamar, quickly.
Well, I might have just a very little, I have a kind of alter view of that, given that we're in an industry with so many talented women, so many women with so much experience, that I think at some stage you have to think about how you're going to crack that leadership issue. I think in an industry where potentially you haven't got a lot of experience, in your workforce that would allow you to fill those quotas, it's a different story. But here, there are amazing women leaving our industry because they get stuck. And I think that potentially positive inclusion, maybe don't call it quotas, but ensuring that there's positive inclusion at the board level is something that needs to be cracked. And that might mean that there are quotas involved. That's my view.
Yeah, I suppose it's on a company by company basis, I guess. But yeah, you have, those in power in those companies should be actively considered. They should know that it's a women dominated industry at that level, and should act accordingly, I guess. So yeah, good. That's a really good point. I'd like to move the conversation on to discuss the relationship with men in the industry and how it's kind of evolving. So Tamar, if maybe we could stick with you. Do you believe that the barriers for women do still exist, perhaps as they did, or are there more opportunities today?
Yeah, they definitely exist. Look at our numbers. So trying to stick with the data, because the data is clear. There are barriers in our industry. There are still barriers. I would say that not a lot has changed over the course of the last 10 years or so. But I do think that the involvement of men in this discussion is absolutely imperative. I feel really passionate about that, and it's been a learning for me as well since I've had all my experiences, that men have to be part of the conversation. And I think some men are becoming more vocal, more active in terms of their support of women leadership, but men in general in our industry are fairly silent on the subject. And I think it's because they don't necessarily know how to show their support, what to do about it. And I also accept that some of us women have also fostered to some extent, excluding men from some of the conversations, and that isn't the way we're going to move forward either. So I think in the future, something like this, a panel session like this, where we're talking about women in leadership positions, we should have men involved in the discussion rather than it being something the women talk about for ourselves, because I think that's what's going to bring change. And I think that what is really valuable, like women have their spaces where we can network and support and mentor each other when we're having really important discussions around employment policies and all that kind of stuff. We have to have men involved in those conversations. So I think the people that need to get involved in this conversation are the same old men that are at the top of our industry. There are a lot of them, they've been around for a long time, and they are, I'm afraid, the key to unlocking this. So we've got lots of great men in our industry all the way along, and I think there's lots of support, but I think we have to be having the conversations together about how we tackle it. And I'd also like to raise the point that when, we're talking about women in leadership, but we've got a massive related issue with diversity in our business, with regards to having nowhere near enough appropriate representation of Black and brown people in our industries at any level. And I think, again, the men, all of us, men and women in this industry, that's the kind of discussion we all hold the key to unlocking that as well. So I think men, and unfortunately, because they are in most of the leadership positions, those men really do hold the key to cracking these issues.
Absolutely. It's funny enough, you mentioned the diversity issue as well. Diversity Ally is a new campaign that's sort of come about off the network group Black in Events, and yeah, I mean, again, there's a parallel sort of message there. And I interviewed one of the founders recently, and again, it's this concept of willing participation. Don't be afraid to ask uncomfortable questions. You can broach it. If a man at the top of this industry does want to tackle this subject, he shouldn't be afraid to do so. It's just fostering and making sure he's okay. He knows he can have that frank conversation, I guess. Daria, I'd like to get your take on that as well. How is the relationship with men evolving in your eyes?
Well, I think things are developing, and I agree with the previous panelists as well on that, and actually want to maybe extend something that Kelly mentioned earlier as well, in terms of sort of more opportunities and why maybe things are not as good as we'd like them to be. I think things probably will not change without an appropriate work culture shift, in my opinion. I think most organizations really value more the qualities of people who stand at the front of the room, people who take credit. And I think that those are really stereotypically masculine definition of leadership attributes. And I think this will really leave many women's contributions sometimes overlooked and undervalued. So by valuing leadership attributes that women apply more often than men, like being collaborative, inviting inclusive decision making, I think organizations really can elevate women without pushing them to adapt their behavior to masculine norms. So I think that can really help advance women's careers and really benefit organizations. And I think that has been statistically backed up as well. So that's not out of thin air. So definitely work culture shift. And I don't know how to do that. I think leaders should be start valuing maybe different qualities and promoting people with different range of attributes as well.
For sure. If actually that's kind of very relatable to another audience question that just popped in, which I'd like to throw in there, and it's come from Mirabelle Chatterjee. Do you think, she writes, that women in this industry are made to feel that they are better at the behind the scenes roles such as marketing and operations and are not encouraged to push for more senior roles? Would anyone like to have a pop at that question?
I'll have a go, and I'll disclose that Mirabelle works in the same company as me. I don't think so. I think maybe we're a bit of that problem. I think maybe sometimes we women think that's the role that we should take, and I can't really think that we'll be made to think that's where we belong in an organisation. But I think sometimes most operations teams are dominated by women. Same for marketing, but I don't know whether it's because the market makes us feel. I think we kind of sometimes we're guilty of thinking that's where we should sit, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think there's a big issue as part of this complex onion in the way that women are and our levels of confidence and what we think we can do. And I know that, when I started off as saying, I realised in all my career I've only had one woman boss, with the exception of one male boss, they've all been brilliant, and they've all made me feel that I can do more than I can do. And so I don't know. I don't agree. I think maybe I think that's an easy cop out to say that women should be in marketing or operations.
Okay.
Sorry, Mirabelle.
No problem. That's what we're here for. Yes, Kelly, did you want to contribute?
Just quickly following on from that, just the obvious point that I'm sure lots of people are already thinking, but is that, when you look at the big organisers, certainly in my experience, most of the people who get up to exhibition director and beyond have come through the sales route. So that's a problem we need to look at ourselves then, isn't it? If we need to, well, the companies need to consider people from marketing and operations routes to get to the top as well, but also maybe we need to get more women in sales too.
Okay, I'm going to take the conversation on, and actually, Kelly, I'm going to stick with you and come at you with this one first. But we talk about success, but how do we actually define it in the context of this discussion? I mean, is it a destination or is it a journey?
But success from a personal perspective, I'm going to answer that if that's okay. I think what I've discovered about myself over the years is that you have to define what success is for yourself, because it's such an individual thing. And for me, it's changed throughout my career as well, because becoming a parent, meant that my kind of what was important to me, my priorities changed completely. And I wanted to do less days at work because I wanted to spend time with my kids. And ultimately, that's what drove me to start my own business, because I wanted to continue to have more time to be around my kids while they were, still tiny and young and little before they grow up. So I think it's a case of kind of going deep within yourself really and figuring out what you want, because I think a lot of us do measure ourselves against other people. We might have a role model who's another woman or a man who is miles ahead of us in the career path that we've chosen, and we don't consider ourselves successful because we compare ourselves to them. But if success to you is working a 4-day week so you can have an extra day with your family, or is, you know, really actually enjoying your holidays and taking them, and not feeling like you've got to work during those times, then you should know what that is for you, and celebrate it. I'm the worst at this. I don't take my own advice at all, but I do think we should celebrate our own successes more. Partly to do with whether you're a glass half empty or a glass half full kind of a person, I suppose. But you know, I know I beat myself up for not doing as well as I think I could have done all the time. But actually, when I'm kinder to myself, I realise I am doing a good job, and I should recognise that and just stop for a second and not rush on to the next thing and think, actually, I did do a good job, and then just stop and recognise it before you charge off to the next thing that's on the list.
Yeah, that's a really interesting personal take on it. I like that. Alison, maybe I could get your kind of view on that. How do you define success in this context?
Look, I think there's so many different elements to it. I think, you know, we become obsessed with how many women are on boards, etc. And we need to remember that not everyone wants to be on a board. And actually, it's all right just to be the very best version of yourself and get up to the next level, or set up your own business, or go off and do something completely different. But I think, you know, success for me, if I had to, you know, I've got a 10-year-old daughter, and Tamar's right, we have made some changes, but not many. And I think if I was trying to sort of define success for her, it would be many, many things. It would be pushing people up from the middle who wanted to be pushed up to the top, mentoring people, creating flexible working, but also just realizing that actually men and women are different, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay. You know, most Fortune 500 companies that have a diverse board, not just gender diversity, do better. And actually, it's all right to be different. You know, we do have different skill sets, and you know, many, you know, the bigger companies have done unconscious bias training for men, and they kind of don't really know that they're doing it, because they think, well, actually, I didn't know that person in our organisation wanted to be promoted. I didn't realise it. And perhaps, and you marry that with perhaps we're sometimes guilty of we're being too hard on ourselves, and we've got to score 10 out of 10 to move up to the next level, you know. And I think we just got to we've got to have an open dialogue with males and females and say, look, we're better together. And actually, you know, in our business, I think we are we need to do better in ethnic diversity, but in gender diversity, we're quite good. And actually, we complement each other. And I think that for me is definition of success. And then, you know, if someone wants to get from a marketing exec to marketing manager, and they're fine at that level, then we've got a responsibility to build that pipeline, and then and pull people up. And because not, you know, I think sometimes we can be our worst enemies. You know, I often think, would I have pushed, you know, someone pushed me to become an exhibition director, and I was like, oh, I'm not ready. No, I can't do that. Oh, I can't do that. And it happened to be a man. He said, okay, you're not quite ready, but you'll be ready in 6 months. Do it. And I think you know, success to me is many, many things, but it's just not. It's helping women get the best out of each other, and not being, you know, not saying, look, you've got to get to the board of Reed, or, you know, it's not. There are only so many positions on the board of these companies, and there are fewer and fewer of these companies. So it's all right just to be, you know, set up your own business, or, you know, or get to the next level, but being very happy in yourself and not sitting there thinking, oh my God, I'm really pissed off that bloke's just got the job and I could have done it. You know, we need to be, you know, we just need to be more open and call it out if we see stuff happening. Because in my opinion, most men, and I've worked with a few dinosaurs, and I know Ruth Carter's on this call, and she probably knows who I'm talking about because she went through EMAP with me. But they're not that many. They're not that many, actually. Most men in our business are, you know, they would want to help, and we just got to engage with them.
That's really interesting. Tamar, would you like to wrap up this particular question for us before we move to tips and advice for our audience?
Yeah, so, well, I've just to echo what Alison said, I think most of it is unconscious. It's just unconscious stereotyping which we do to ourselves and men do to us, and it's just not very conscious. And I think when you're building your career up, I remember this, I thought that if I just worked hard, it will just happen, and it did to a certain extent, but I never went and asked for it. And I felt like I should have to adopt masculine. The things that I saw around me were much more around the way to play politics than it was about how good you were at your job. And I think over time, as the older you get, you just get more fed up of it. I think the younger ones coming through, and I think just being aware of that, and everyone pulling people up and encouraging people will make a difference. I think success is very personal. What success was to me there 20 years ago to what it is now. I think success to some people means status, and it means possessions, and it means money and all that kind of stuff. For me, it means the freedom to make choices about what work you do, about being able, how lucky am I to be able to do work that I enjoy, and that I'm not working just to have a roof over my head, that I don't have to worry about feeding my kids and stuff. So for me, I've come to realize at 50 years old that that's what success is to me. So I don't beat myself up about that stuff anymore, but I do think some of that just comes with just being old and suddenly realizing what's really important in life, that there's a lot of things that are not important, but that doesn't mean things that I do get passionate about is inequality and fairness and justice and that kind of thing. So now that I'm older and I don't really care what people think, I'm much more happy to speak up about it. So I feel that's success.
Very good. Okay, that's really interesting. Now I'm going to ask you all really to give some tips and advice to our audience. Now, we all want to inspire the next generation of women in exhibitions and to prove that progress is possible. That's the important thing here. So I just want to go around the virtual room and ask you each to give your tips and advice that you think is best shared with the audience. So maybe, Katerina, could we start with you, please?
Yeah. Well, actually, I was thinking about this question, and I had a mentor once, and she gave me a really good advice that really, I really followed. She said, wer überholen will, muss blinken, which means, if you translate it, if you want to take over, when you're driving a car, if you want to take over, how does anyone know that you want to take over? So you have to use the blinker or the signal, or I'm not sure what the English perfect term for that is. And I think that's right. You have to show, you have to tell, you have to inform, you have to somehow let the people know that you want to go on. And from what I realized, especially in Germany, we have often the situation that the women are waiting to be asked. They are waiting to be recognized, and they are waiting to get promoted. But I think they have to tell them, I want to, because otherwise it won't happen. So that's, I think, one thing I would actually say was a good advice to me. And I think one way of doing that is, for example, taking over projects that are beside your normal workload. So to get into the scope of the others and to do a good job. That helped me a lot.
Thank you, Katerina. Laurie, could I ask you, please, for your tips and advice for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to say, Katerina, I totally agree with you. And I think that one of the things that I did start doing from a very young age in my career was being bold enough to say, I want this and I'm going to go for it, and I'll prove I can do it. So I was always quite vocal about what I felt I could do. I think someone told me, when I was really quite young, that if you don't believe in yourself, why should anyone else believe in you? And it really stuck with me. And so I never fell into that sort of trap, which I see a lot of women doing, is having that sort of self-doubt, because, you can have the conversation with yourself and be like, yeah, I feel some doubt. But you know what? When faced with a challenge, I come up with good ideas. I figure things out. I'll just assume I can do this and I'll make it work. And so I think that's really important. And I think that it's amazing what you can get if you just ask for it. So I think making sure people are aware of what you want is really important. I think the other thing that's really a good lesson that I learned as well is, I remember I had a boss who said to me, you know what I love about you, Laurie, is that I'll ask for this and you bring back this. And so if you really focus on making your boss's life easier, making whatever they need to achieve easier to achieve, it really takes you a long way. And I've kind of used two things to do that, and this is what I would recommend for people. So I think the first thing is just assuming responsibility for something. So if something isn't working well, something doesn't seem right, something could be done better, I just assumed I was responsible for making that happen and I would want to fix it. And then I took the initiative. So the second thing is to assume responsibility and take initiative. I take the initiative to make it happen. So I never waited for permission. And I think a lot of people sit back and wait for the opportunity to come to them, wait for permission to fix what they know needs to be fixed. I'd say don't do that. And if you're in a company that doesn't appreciate your taking that kind of initiative, then go to another company and find a place that does and that's willing to recognize you for that. But I think that's the biggest thing that you could do, is just really assume responsibility, take initiative, be bold. It is okay to want to succeed, to want to grow, to want to develop. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you are willing to put yourself out there and work hard, it is amazing what you can achieve. So that's my advice. Thank you, Laurie. Daria, could we have your take, please? What's your tips and advice for our audience?
Absolutely. Actually, following Katarina, I think a good advice. Finding a good mentor is a good advice and tip here, because they can help you really direct you in a particular direction and help you identify some of your strengths as well. And I think finding a mentor can be a really powerful tool for professional growth. So I think that's a good advice. And also, I think it's important to build your personal branding. I think it's quite a common theme now, and like companies, we also need to build our personal brand, and you can do it through really being really professional and consistent in your work, but also building professional social media networks, sharing your expertise, sharing your experience. I think that can help as well. And network. I think you use other people's skills and connections by networking. So it can be a very successful way to put yourself forward and meet new people and build your social network. And you never know, you may get a job out of it, or meet someone like a best friend for life. You don't know. But yeah, I think that's really important tip as well.
Great, thank you, Daria. Kelly, could we have your tips and advice, please?
I'm going to say something quite similar to what everybody else has already said, but it's good that we're being consistent, isn't it? That means there's less takeaways for people to figure out which one they're going to follow. But yeah, for me, it's just about, it links with the question about what success is for you individually. You need to spend some time thinking about what it is that you want. And when I had my own business, I worked with a brilliant coach, and one of the questions that she asked us was, what is your best, words to this effect, what does your best life look like in 5 years' time, or 3 years' time, 5 years' time, I think, or 1 year, 3 year, and 5 years, I think it was. And there was she did not let us settle for just saying something really average. It was, no, you need to keep pushing, you need to keep asking yourself the question, dig deeper until you get to something that really makes you feel like you found something good. And then you figure out a plan to get there. So it's what everybody else has already said. The personal branding thing is such a good thing to look at right now, because we can all post on social media, and we can all get much more visibility than we've ever had been able to 10 years ago. What training do you need to get you there? And another thing I think I'm much more comfortable with now is, if the company I'm working for isn't providing the training that I need, I'll often go out and figure out a way to get that myself, whether it's funding it myself, which I do appreciate isn't possible for everybody. But there's so many free training resources out there that I'm sure we've all been using during lockdown to kind of, expand our horizons and fill our days to an extent as well. And the network thing as well that Daria mentioned, who can you ask, who do you know that knows somebody else who can get you a bit of work experience, or whatever it is, just working your network. But just do it with intention, and make it happen for yourself, because nobody else is going to do it for you.
Absolutely, true words indeed. Tamar, could we get your tips and advice, please, for the audience?
Yep. So, well, I've got a few. So, I'm hoping there are some men listening into this. So, my tip for men would be to just to ask you to think about proactively supporting your female colleagues and employees through their career journey in the same way that that women should be doing. And this might really require not only women but men as well to look at and to try to understand what unconscious biases you might have, or the organizations that you're in, the type of, the kind of stereotyping that this isn't an accusation, but it's just something that we've all got unconsciously about the way that we view and judge people. And then once you've understood that, to become practiced at recognizing it around you, and that when you see it happening, speaking up for the women, that your colleagues, that it's happening to, because that proactivity can make a real difference to people's careers, and it kind of needs to happen everywhere. I think it's really hard for men to do that and have that empathy when they haven't had that direct experience. But I think if you can commit to really trying to put yourselves in those shoes and to recognize that unconscious bias, it can make all the difference. And then for women, I think the need for all of us to do the same thing, because I think we hold them too. We have unconscious bias, and we judge and we stereotype each other. But I think that our job is to support and mentor, and wherever we have the power, us people here on this channel, we have power to bring women up, and to support women, and to do everything that we can to speak up about stuff, and to support them in their careers. And I know, this ideology of meritocracy really exists amongst us, that if we just work hard, we'll be recognised and we'll make it. And that clearly isn't completely true. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this discussion now. The stats speak for themselves. So I think empathy, even though some of us haven't had that experience of having our career curtailed, it does happen. So even though it's been okay for us, recognise that there are people that have really struggled and have different experiences. And I think as we tackle these issues, the workplaces, the culture of our workplaces will become better for everyone, because it's not just women that want to spend time with their kids. It's not just them. Men want to have not all men just want to, earn loads of money and drive a Jag and never see their families ever again. This is going to benefit all of us, no matter what the gender, the colour, sexuality, what disabilities you've got. If we can recognise the unconscious bias we've got and try to pull each other up and to call people out, it will make an amazing difference, I think. That's my...
Thank you, Tamar. And Alison, please.
Not much to add, really. All of the above, especially ask for forgiveness and not permission. But I think also just be yourself. Don't feel that you have to adopt, traits that are not natural to you. I think it's really disarming. Sometimes in a meeting, I'll just say, I don't know the answer, because I don't know the answer. I can't. And actually, just be your normal, true self, and don't feel you have to kind of develop some kind of testosterone-driven, male-like characteristics. You really don't. You don't, and it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, I don't know. I mean, how many times in the last few months have we all said, I have no clue. We haven't done this before. So I think don't alter your true self.
We've got time, I think. Well, there's a slew of questions have come in, but I think we've got time to squeeze in one. We have had some already, and I think your tips have actually covered a lot of the audience questions that have come in. But there's an interesting one here. It's anonymous, and it reads, those who have freelanced in the industry, do you think being a woman in a contractor role face different challenges to ones in a full-time role? Has anyone got any views on that? No strong opinions either way. So you don't really think that those working in the freelance contracting capacity will face different challenges? You reckon the challenges are the same?
Well, I'll just say I think they face unique challenges as freelancers. My God, I in my network, I know a lot of freelancers and contractors whose livelihood has been decimated. I think those people that are working for companies or employees who have managed to at least hang on to being furloughed, which isn't going to last for too much longer, have been lucky by comparison to what's happened to people in freelancing contracting roles. So I have complete empathy. I don't know, I'm not going to say yes or no, because I don't know whether being female or male makes any difference to how you've been impacted, but I certainly recognise that freelancers have been hurt badly.
Great stuff. Okay, guys, well, I'm going to draw our discussion to a close. We've had a decent hour's discussion. I'd like to personally thank our panel for taking time out and joining us all today. I thought that was a really insightful discussion, and we're going to be doing a write-up for the next issue of Exhibition News. A message to our audience: if there's any questions you would like to maybe ask our panelists, or there's something you'd like us to follow up on, please do get in touch. Our email addresses you should have already, and we'll maybe perhaps forward some of the unanswered questions to our panelists if they don't mind taking the time to respond. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye.